All right, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Contact Lost, the Polish English-speaking podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k. Wow, we've been releasing a lot of those episodes right now, but I think it's always the case before a major event. So we did that before the WTC. We went there, so we felt obliged to do a lot of episodes about that. And now we're going to the LGT to do live coverage of that as well. And we also feel obliged to deliver as much content as possible before the event. So you could have seen episodes with Kyle Grundy, with Will Whitaker, with James Grover, and many, many others, people who will participate at the event, both in the invitational and the main event. And yeah, we just felt that it's right to put some spotlight onto them and allow them to talk and bring their top seven something to you for your viewing pleasure. Today is not going to be very different. So today you can see the guest on the screen already. So I have decided to bring in Ines Wilson, known from StatCheck, known from the Scottish national team, and probably many other things that I cannot remember right now. So welcome, Ines.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I will say your intro music, very different vibe to ours, but also a bop. I was just dancing along the entire way through the 30 seconds. Can't help it.
So the feeling is mutual because I like last week or 2 weeks ago I wrote to Jeremy to ask whether the music for your show is actually like a tune that someone from StatCheck has created or is it from the internet because it's just such an earworm. And when I walk my dogs, I listen to it and then I hum it throughout the entire day. So I mean, yeah, the podcast music is better than we thought. Anyway, today we focus on you and today we focus on your top seven, or the top seven of your choosing, which is the top seven force multipliers going into the LGT, or in general, top seven force multipliers in the game right now. But before we get into that, maybe let's focus on you first, and on what you do, and then maybe a little bit on the LGT. But yeah, let's start about you. We had you previously on the show at the time when the game was sort of in a what's the word, hiatus, when we were in between ninth and 10th, and yep, podcasts didn't really have a lot to cover because people already didn't want to play events waiting for the 10th edition and so on. So we did the series about my 40k job, and you came and talked about what you do professionally now. So yeah, let's delve into that a little bit. How is that going? Would you like to recommend that to anyone, perhaps?
I mean, personally, obviously, I have to, right?
Obviously.
So yeah, no, I've been doing the sort of the coaching side of things full time now since the start of February, which is when I got back from LVO. It's now September, so frankly, the fact that it's still going is confusing, and I'm eternally grateful for it. It's been an awesome 6 or 7 months now. Wow, that's way too long. I'm definitely turned soft and feeble in my work from home life. I don't think I'm capable of working like 3 hours in a row now. But other than that, no, it's been going really well. Been picking up steadily with more people coming on board. As partly I do better at tournaments, and partly and also like play things like Death Guard, which apparently there was a big group that were like, wow, people are playing
You
factions.
actually
It's
did
not
that.
normal faction. That helped a ton as well. So there's always like good ways to like market yourself and get publicity out, and that combined with I think generally of the growing tournament scene, like people, it died down a little bit across sort of like the really terrible meta, but it was still growing a little bit, and it definitely seems like it's back to being fairly reasonable growth again. So that combined with the two, and me just being a little more out there, people knowing what I do a little more has helped it grow steadily, which has been great. Um, I'm to the point where I like have to actually schedule my week now, as opposed to just being like, yeah, so you can go in on Monday at this time, and you can go in on Monday at this. Like, and I'm now at the point where like I have to actually like pay attention so that I don't overload a day or anything like that, which is a good kind
Hmm.
of problem to have, but not one that I was anticipating having. So it's something that I'm like working through, is like actually scheduling for myself, which it turns out I'm not great at. So
So, would you say that the growing popularity of the game and the events, it's going to be probably a weird question, but do you think that this can be attributed to GW actually doing a good job with 10th edition, or is it thanks to people like you, thanks to people like, I don't know, whoever does podcasts right now, Adam Camilleri, or other people who draw audiences to YouTube, to Spotify, to other places like that, who actually make people want to play the game? Which one is it?
I think it's a bit of both. So
Hmm.
when the game is at least palatable, Games Workshop set the minimum bar for how many people are going to be invested. The community encourages people to do more of that, right? That's kind of the like Yeah, Games Workshop set the quantity, and then the tournament scene and the people involved in it and the community and all that set the like the quality, not the quality, like in the like the way that people approach it. So people still played 40K during the break. They just didn't. They just like played games with
Yeah,
their friends in their house. They didn't go to tournaments because there was no point, right? Um, the amount of people that are doing that is going to be determined by how good the game is. If there are more tournaments, there's more opportunities, right? That's great, but those have to exist, and want people will have to want to go to those for other reasons. So I don't think either of them. I don't think either of them get to the state without the other. Games Workshop have done a really good job of taking the community feedback on board and doing their best to change the mark in terms of how the game is balanced. Did they get it perfect? No, they're never going to get it perfect. It's
yeah,
unreasonable to expect them to. They did a good job, and I think the numbers of recovered show for it. I think very briefly, like we saw the stats for this weekend, there was 2,000 players at the tournaments this weekend, which is like double what it was the weekend before. Like, yeah, part of that is it's now September; it's no longer the summer holidays. People maybe don't have their kids as much; they can like go to a tournament, or teachers and like there's a billion reasons why there could be a big why,
obviously.
it's good to see that like we can get back to those numbers again. LGT last year was the busiest weekend we had on record. So I look forward to seeing how it does. Similar, like even compared to like LVO, like the actual weekend as a whole was more games. And if this year shows that it's similar numbers or more numbers, well, that shows good year-on-year growth, right? That's kind of what you're looking for. Um, but
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I saw the numbers for the Polish team championships that took place last week. I mean, the weekend before this one. So we had almost 250 players. I think 45, 46 teams, five-man teams that went there and played, which is unprecedented for Poland. Like we've never heard
yeah, it
had
was
an
like
event
the
of that
twice
magnitude.
twice the size of the previous biggest Polish event or something like that. I heard.
Exactly. Exactly. So and and this attracted sponsors that we usually wouldn't see because there was like a dairy company that actually provided food. There was another company that never had anything, I think, like a patisserie that would never have anything to do with the event. But the well, Poland winning the WTC plus just the organizers doing a good job attracted more people, more sponsors, more everything. Uh, I guess it's testament to the fact that the game is in a good place.
Yeah. I would also like to say that I think that a general changing attitudes towards team events has come about a little bit. The amount
Very much
of
so.
extra coverage towards it, like not this is probably less effective for Europe, but towards like I know the American team has announced a bunch of team tournament format, like a couple of like team tournament circuits and stuff like that, and the UK has like the ITT and the ITT and the one that's not the ITT, but it's basically the ITT. Um, Coventry teams, I think it's like the Coventry
Hmm.
ITT. I don't know. It's difficult to keep track of these things that are like sell out almost instantly. We've hit capacity for our team event in Scotland, which is significantly smaller, but
Hmm.
it's like getting 12 teams of five in Scotland is unheard of. I don't think we had 60 tournament players 5 years ago. Um, so it's really awesome. Like I genuinely like the team community has been incredibly welcoming to all the new people that come on board. I know just paying attention to like the WC captains chat, which is like there's just new people like drip feeding into it every couple of weeks, like new captains, new teams, new countries all together, and it's incredible. Like it's genuinely awesome. And as everybody knows, as we team evangelists say, it's the best way to play 40K, right? So,
Yeah.
which
So
nobody
so
believes
many
until
people
they
have
do
said
it.
that. No, so many people have said that already. That as long as they keep on repeating it, it will eventually become the truth. But I think there is also like a lot to back this up in terms of facts. Like if you look at the WTC, that's a place you want to be. It's the Olympic Games of this game, and then the fact that it is sort of driving multiple nations or shaping what the nations do. Like if you look at France, if you look at Poland, if you look at more and more nations that actually adjust their circuits to prepare for the WTC, it's a fantastic thing. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Even America and Canada, bastions of doing things their own way, are like changing the way they do their qualification processes and all that sort of thing. And it's really great. I know for one thing, like there's a team China trying to come next year.
wow.
It's going to be
I
awesome.
heard of Korea, but not of China. But then,
Yeah,
yeah, and that would be something that those would be probably like the dark horses of the event because no one knows what they do.
exactly.
I think I've seen one episode of the Thursday Show by Adam Camilleri and Dustin from Team Canada, who once talked about a tournament in Singapore, and like their wacky lists and so on, but that was the only time I heard about the game in Asia. So that would be mind blowing
Yeah, there
to
used to be a really good podcast that kind of covered that sort of scene. Like it was centered around like a guy in China, a couple of guys in Australia, and another guy in New Zealand. And it was called 40K Frontiers, and they covered like a tournament in Argentina and Mexico and all
uh-huh.
that, and like the Philippines, like Singapore and China and Japan and all that stuff. And sadly, that podcast went away, but it was run by a couple of friends of mine, so I'm going to shout it out for having been a good show at the time. But yeah, there's definitely a gap for like that kind of content coming out again because there's so many people playing games in all kinds of places. You see it occasionally just like pop up on like the Meta Mondays or on the like your number competitive innovations of like tournaments in Mexico with like a slightly weird meta that's
Hmm.
not and like they're not big tournaments, right? They're not by our standards, but they're big tournaments. Like there are 30 to 60 people playing games in these little countries that nobody would expect. Team Argentina have been to WTC before. Like yeah, I don't know. I think there's a ton of space for really cool innovations that outside of this traditional sort of like 40K centers that everybody hears and speaks about.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed. Definitely a niche that needs to be filled in. So if anyone is listening and you have an idea and some spare time on your hands, we cannot cover everything. So go ahead and try, and we will welcome you with open hands because the more content creators, the more good content out there, the better for everyone. All right, Ines, let's move on to your topic of your choosing. Um, so the top 7 force multipliers at the LGT. Uh,
Yeah.
the LGT, like the WTC, is happening very shortly after a major change to the meta. So either the release of the 10th edition before the WTC, or now the release of the balanced data slate. Uh, what would you describe the state of the game going into the LGT before we get to those force multipliers and that
Am I allowed
specific
to be
topic?
mean here?
Um, Honest.
Okay. It's still miserable in like it's miserable against one faction. And then other than that, it's great. But that faction still exists, so I can't like with any credence say that this is a fun meta.
Hmm.
Um I fundamentally do not think there is a point playing a game against a good Eldar player. You just show up and you lose.
Hmm.
Um there is scope for them to make a mistake. There is scope for them you to be better than them. There is no scope if you are both good and you both play reasonably without committing. You lose that game. It does not matter really what you do. And I do not find that particularly enjoyable as somebody who wants to try and trade on how good I am at the game. Feeling like that doesn't really matter that much in the tough games is, disheartening to say the least.
Unless you bring Eldar yourself and you play Eldar versus Eldar, which turns it into almost like a game of chess. Then.
Also, I'm not an Eldar player, and I do not have the years of experience and muscle memory on that kind of faction, and I don't own that faction, so I'm not doing that.
Hmm.
But yeah, whether I own the army or not, I generally prefer not to be a determining factor in how well you do at a tournament. I get that there's always like you always want to have a spread, like a range of armies you're okay playing, and one of them should be like top 5-ish, and that's
Hmm.
fine. But when you're playing army 2 and you feel like you can't beat army 1, it's not a very diverse meta.
Hmm. So going into the LGT very soon after the balanced data slate, do you feel well prepared and do you feel that you have play tested what you
Oh,
wanted
I feel incredibly
enough
well prepared to lose to Eldar. Yeah.
to lose the other?
I don't know, man. I spent a bunch of time playtesting armies for LGT, so I obviously the new Tyranny Codex came out, and I put a few games into that. I put a bunch of games into Grey Knights because all of the buzz coming out of like Team America after WTC was that the Eldar matchup is great for. It's not. It's terrible. It was awful.
Hmm.
When you play it into like somebody, well, I have the advantage of someone like Brian Stipe as a practice partner, so I put that game into Brian. It's miserable. I put them in the box. Or I played them into 20 Necron Warriors, and the end net result of the game is that I killed 2 models. Things like that
Fun, fun, fun.
were very disheartening for the
Hmm.
Grey Knight build. I then put some time back in on my Dark Angels, which I'm playing for the Invitational, and I could not find a Dark Angels build that I liked for the other matchup, which I knew, like my WTC list, the line I had was it lost to a Night Spinner in the Incarn, and neither of those units went away, so I don't know
Yeah.
why I thought them losing points would would change anything there. I would lose to a particularly comfortable 500 points of Eldar with that army, with a Night Spinner and the Incarnate, maybe like a Warp Spider squad. I think I lose that game as Dark Angels, so that kind of felt pointless. I played that game like a tabled on turn 2 and moved on with my life. So I ended up like putting a few practice games in on CSM because I was recommended them by a few people. Anthony being an evangelist for CSM, Brian quite liking them, having played against them a bunch. So I put some games into that, found that I kind of liked the style, felt like I had It's one of those armies that it feels like you kind of always have a puncher's chance because everything does so much effing damage that
Hmm.
you can just be like, right, let's just try this, and if it works, then at least I have the high roll potential. And that was what I kind of felt like I was missing into like Eldar was just the ability to just be like, hey, what if I just scam you? What if I just put the Chaos Lord in and he hits 11 times and dev wounds 7 times and picks up a Wraith Guard squad? Like, I can work with that. It's not likely, but I can work with that. Whereas my Deathwing Knights weren't making combat. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of the direction I went. Obviously, we'd seen a bunch of people like Alex Sacco and Liam Viesel play them to a great extent as well. Fantastic players that are definitely leading the way on stuff like that. So I ended up with a build very similar to theirs. I'm quite excited. I'm quite excited to play it. I feel fairly prepared. I've not prepped as much as I would like, but I also feel a lot more comfortable in the list. Like last year, I had a pretty bad run with Gene Circuits where I was just under prepped. I swapped to the list, didn't get enough practice on it, played it at a tournament, had okay results, took it to LGT, had not great results because I hadn't really tested the Necron matchup enough. Lost them twice, and then kind of stuck with them, which I was kind of happy with, like because I then ended up pulling them into like some decent runs after that. But the
Mm,
LGT itself was rough. Whereas for CSM, the playstyle feels pretty familiar, pretty similar. It's not like a wholesale like I'm not playing a horde army with like control elements for the first time. I'm playing a high damage melee army. I've played that before with like good shooting elements. It feels very like my Iron Hands. Is really what
hmm.
I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
I wanted to
It
say.
feels a lot like Iron Hands, and I'm very
Should be
comfortable with Iron
familiar.
Hands.
And it's not
So
going to break your back as well, like playing it while playing against your cult or any other
my
horde
Colts
army.
wasn't that bad either. But yeah, you're not wrong. It's like 40 models. It's great.
I mean, any kind of that army. I remember being there at the LGT last year and seeing Manny with his little cart with all the racks. Like he looked like an old man just bent over this cart,
You've
pushing it from
seen
table to
Manny
table.
and Manny's invitational list, right?
I've seen Manny's invitation list. I've played against that list even. So yeah, I know what he's bringing, but it's still not as many as his rack list from
I'm
last
not
year.
sure it isn't. To be fair, it's like
Uh, Maybe it's getting close, but I think the racks was still like more
sure. I think
units.
his invitational list is only like 180 models. It's not far off. I feel like if you're within like plus or minus 10% of 200 models, like you're allowed to be like this is too many models.
By the way, are all the lists available now? So
I
both
have
for
no idea if the main event lists are available right now. I have not even remotely checked. I
yeah,
know that the invitational lists are because they've been available for 2 weeks.
yeah. So that I have seen. I was surprised because Zach, told us I think to post the lists by the 13th of September,
They're
not
not
to
live
get
yet.
enough practice with them. But then um, I didn't even know when they became available. But anyway, we're digressing. Let's get down to the top seven force multipliers because I think the majority of those units, if not all, will be seen at the LGT, will
I
be
wouldn't be
included
surprised
into
if every
lists.
single one of these data sheets made top 8. So
Yeah. So let's start.
sure. Should I start by
I
telling people what I'm defining a force multiplier as? It's probably the best
Yes,
place
I
to
think
go.
that's the best sort of introduction before we go into it.
Cool. So my basic premise with this was force multipliers are units that make an army do more than it should, right? So it's whether it's a unit that gives you like a new option, a new dimension of play, a unit that takes a build and turbocharges it and makes it like actually a viable list at the top level, or just a unit that allows like everything else to just function easier. They're not necessarily like the high damage units. They're not necessarily like the anchor units that you're going to build your list around. You know, like a high damage unit might be something like Desolation Marines or Deathwing Knights from my previous list, or like an anchor unit that you build around being like the Abaddon and Terminators. Just a thing that you have solid and sits in a place. The the force multiplier is often like it's a single piece. They can be expensive, they can be inexpensive. Like Gulliman from last edition was a great example, or even this edition is a great example of a force multiplier. It's something that takes everything else and says, hey, go do more than you should. And there's a lot of different ways you can approach that, and we'll touch on some, and I hope to touch on some of those during the top seven, plus the bonus mention of the model I hate the most in Warhammer. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the thought process behind it. Was these are units that, by virtue of them existing, allow a build to exist that doesn't exist otherwise, or allow a build that is good to function at like peak efficiency. That's kind of the thought process behind it. The idea being that if you took this unit out, the list is less than the sum of its parts. Whereas with this unit, everything just cleans up, becomes a tournament list rather than a list that you were playing. Is kind of the thought process.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it as well because this is one of the topics that I find the most interesting, and also probably not everyone is as seasoned with the game as you, for example. So there's still a lot of educational value for people to watch this and take something away from this. So
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. Plus,
without
you can hear
further
my
ado,
opinion on a bunch of factors I really don't like. So,
I mean, it's always of value. So let's jump right into it. I'm just gonna share my screen so that everyone can see what we are talking about. Uh, I think the presentation. Yeah, okay, it's there. So let's go with your number 7 because I understand we have them in ascending order. So
yep. So my number 7 is the Necron Canoptic Reanimator. The idea being that this is it's a model that provides, so for anybody who doesn't know what it does, provides a 12-inch aura of whenever a unit would reanimate, it reanimates an additional D3 wounds. So when you have units like Necron Warriors that can reanimate like 75 billion times a battle round, slight exaggeration, I think it's like 8, it's a lot of additional healing. It really helps those units hit the threshold where they become actually unkillable for a majority of armies. The idea being something like you can have a Canoptic Reanimator, you take damage, you use the stratagem that when you take damage, you reanimate, and your Necron Warrior unit reanimates 2d3 plus 4 damage. And then you get shot again, and then you use the Ghost Arc. And then in your opponent's command phase, then in your command phase, you heal additional again. And then in their command phase, you heal additional. And between the time of you getting shot, the first time you got shot, the second time you got shot, the Reanimator's brought like 8 extra models back, and it really helps for pushing through that critical mass. Because it's an aura as well, it supports 2 units at once. It can support Lich Guard, it supports character healing, things like the Doomsday Arc, the Transcendent Catan, just everything just stays a little bit more topped up because of the Reanimator. And yes, it's not cheap. Yes, it's not fragile, but you can't stand it in the open kind of thing. Like it's not fragile when it's behind a wall. It does lock your army down a little bit, which is why I have it at number 7, because it definitely can. It definitely limits a little bit of the way you approach the game, and it's not an essential unit. But for the way that like the Necron Horde or like Horde plus Lich Guard, whether it's like 20 Warriors, 10 Lich Guard, double Lich Guard, or double Warriors, maybe even triple Warriors if you're an absolute psychopath, the Canoptic Reanimator really just cleans up that game plan. It makes everything just flow a little simpler.
mhm.
It gives your opponent like a solid point of attack. Like you can say, hey, if you want to try and sink like 2 Night Spinners, 3 Night Spinners into this, yeah, maybe it goes down. But that's a turn that you didn't Night Spinner or anything else. So, in that way as well, it helps out a ton. Um, yeah, I would struggle to justify building a Necron list that didn't center around one of these, as far as it being like the thing that just makes sure everything else works. And you could always just leave the range of it, right? It's not like it's essential.
Mhm.
But for 100 points, or 100 points on that ballpark. I've genuinely no idea what this costs.
Mhm.
Necron lists are impossible to read because every single unit blends together. Canoptek,
Pretty much.
Canoptek, Canoptek,
Yeah.
Canoptek. Yeah, 105 points. It does exactly what you're looking for from a unit that's kind of like this thing. It's also just like OC3 and with a 4-up field of pain on your home objective, not going to randomly die. It can, make itself an assault weapon with the stratagem to advance and shoot and grab your investigating signals or whatever, or get on a midfield objective. Like, it does everything you're looking for out of a little garbage unit, which is to say it makes your army impossible to kill and scores points. Which for 105 points, I'm not really complaining about. Can't really complain about.
Yep. So a question again, because this is supposed to be both um, fun and enjoyable, but also educational. So let's pretend for a moment that your first game you face a Necron army with that unit on the table. What would your target priority in such a game be? Would you go
Honestly,
for would you go for the force multiplier to eliminate it immediately if your opponent allows you to, and then bit by bit focus on the hammers of the list, so either warriors, Lichguard, or I don't know, locust destroyers, or would you focus on the hammers and completely ignore the force multipliers because as long as there are no hammers, the force multiplier is not important anyway.
Yeah, so my advice to Necrons is to know your damage output. If your list can kill a Necron warrior brick, just kill the warrior bricks. If your list can't kill the warrior bricks, kill everything else and get to the objectives first. Those are
Hmm.
your two options. There is not really a third. You cannot chip damage a warrior squad. You cannot really chip damage a Lich Guard squad. You can Lich Guard are a little easier because they have a little bit less access to reanimation and they heal a little bit less. Like they don't get the +3. So you can maybe try and force some damage to them if you have the right profiles. But broadly, no, don't bother. If you can kill, if they've got the Catan, if they've got Doomsday Arcs, if they've got Destroyers, focus them. Just get rid of them. If you can't kill a Warrior Brick, don't try.
Hmm.
You killing the Reanimator is not going to make a difference. The Reanimator is there to create a. It creates a "you must be this tall to ride" the killing Necron Warriors party bus. If you
Hmm.
can't kill 20 Necron Warriors in one activation, you can't kill 20. You can't kill 20 Necron Warriors at all. It's not possible. They
Hmm.
heal too many times. Unless you have like 5 units that will all kill 10, then you can maybe like get like 4 damage to stick to them a turn. On turn 5, you can kill that squad. Um, it's not valuable. It doesn't do anything for you. So just don't bother trying. Um, whereas if your opponent gives you the Grandmaster, like if they let you drop in and obliterate it to death, or you shoot it with you're running triple whirlwind and you oath it turn one and kill it, like sure, like fine. If it's sat
Hmm.
behind a wall, you're not interacting with it. Maybe you can get 6 Inceptors onto it or something like that. But um, yeah, if they give you it, take it out because then you can start actually damaging Necron warriors. But if they don't, they're not going to give it to you. So just go around it. Either go through the warriors or go around it and get to everything else and get to the objectives first. That's really the way to approach it. It's a false multiplier in the sense that it just says it creates this like gate check where
Hmm.
you must pass a certain damage threshold to interact with Necron warriors or to interact with Lich Guard, and you spending a bunch of those resources trying to kill a reanimator that has a functional 12 wounds and a 3-up save behind a wall is just, it's a little bit pointless.
Yeah. Okay, that is clear. Let's move on then.
That sounds good. So
Number
let's go
6.
back to the second one. So the second number 6 is not technically a unit, although we have provided the carrier for it. It's the World Eater's Enhancement Favored of Corn, which is generally I would recommend running on a Juggerlord and Lord on Juggernaut, or potentially a Master of Execution if you're really trying to save points.
Hmm.
All this does is when you do your Blessings of Corn roll, which is the 8 dice you roll looking for doubles and triples and 6s and 12s, and like the left color, the left pip pointing to the east and the right pip pointing to the north and all that kind of stuff. You just get to reroll that. But it's not technically a reroll, which means if you've used icons, which are the things that sit in like Jackal squads and Berserker squads that say if you're on an objective, reroll a dice, you get to use those rerolls on the initial roll and then also on the second attempt. So it gives you a lot of chances, a lot of attempts for hitting Angron Resurrection, for hitting Advance and Charge +2 move, lethal hits if you want it, Fight on Death being a very big one in a lot of the meta right now because there's a ton of melee armies out there again, which is great to see. Favorite of Corn just cleans up all of that. And when you're playing an army that is as volatile as World Eaters, which I think are generally a bit sleeper for the meta, like Anthony Vanilla has played them for the main event. So is Michael Hooper from Team Iceland, a few other people like that. They're a super, super dynamic army that has a really, really awkward fail point in the Blood Yahtzee, the
Yeah,
Favors of
the
Corn.
blood type points.
Yeah. And this just makes that work on a very, very much more consistent level where it becomes a thing you can actually rely on. It changes the math, it takes you from like 80% to hit like the +2 move advance and charge to, much, much higher, like in the 90s. And that is the kind of thing that over the course of a 5 to 10 round tournament wins games. Um, Without him, you can play the army. The army is good. The army is not great. With this, it is reliable. It does exactly what it says on the tin. You get all of your mechanics in, and then you also get like with the Juggernaut Lord, you get like a backfield objective holder that does some more wounds on the charge, is reasonably tanky. With the Max of Executions, you get like a secondary damage output source, but the guy wants to sit at the back because once this guy goes down, it tends to be a little awkward. That's one thing you'll find a lot from these first multipliers. There are units that like to sit at the back quite a lot because if you're not multiplying your force anymore, well, then what's the point of having them?
Exactly.
So yeah, but he's definitely like just a nice little piece to sit back. I know he's in Anthony's list at the very least. I've not had a chance to see like the Icelandic version, but yeah, just makes the game plan simple. You do
Hmm.
what it says on the tin almost every turn, and when you're playing an army, it's really, really, really wants to get in your opponent's face because it doesn't really do anything else. It's nice to have that kind of reliability and surety that your plan is going to work, especially given that you roll Blood Tithe at the beginning of the battle round and not at the start of your turn. So if you go second, your opponent knows what you have, and
Hmm.
there are advantages and disadvantages to that. But if your opponent knows you don't have advance in charge this turn, well, you're gonna probably have a bad turn as everything sits at just that dark engine says, like sticks its nose at you and goes like neener neener neener. Uh, as they're like, well, you're basically Death Guard right now, and you're like, I know this sucks.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's nice to not have that be a thing. You get a little bit
Yeah.
more of that fear of the unknown back in your opponent.
So what exactly happened that people are starting to lean into world eaters again? Because pre-data slate, this army very much didn't exist.
Yeah, I think
Now
they caught
people are picking it up.
just enough points reductions. Like they didn't get like wholesale reduced, but
Hmm.
they are cheap enough that you can justify it. You also like don't randomly lose whole 8 bound to you don't like randomly lose a whole 8 bound squad to devastating wounds now. They didn't really have much choice of it themselves. Angron genuinely is just really good. And being able to like have Angron get on the board and actually live is not nothing. And also Anthony finally read what the Berserker Glaive enhancement does, and he did not realize that it added D3 to your damage. And that guy on Master Execution slaps really hard to the point where like I have heard multiple stories of now of that guy one shotting the avatar of Kane, and like as far as I'm concerned, that was all they were looking for.
Mm.
Um, the list looks super fun. It's got a lot more pressure now. There is just a little bit less. Like it got a bit more stuff. Everyone else lost a bit of stuff. And when you're playing an army that has such binary damage thresholds and win the game thresholds as World Eaters, everything else just coming down towards the middle opens up a ton of opportunity. I think everybody said this when the rules came out. That is an oppressive rule set with garbage points values, and we're gonna get to find out if it's at the point where like it's at least playable now, because the speed of that army is ungodly.
Mhm.
There is nothing quite like. I think there was a quote in the StatCheck Discord earlier, which was like, "You told me what the damage output was, and you told me what the threat range was, but I didn't understand what the damage output and the threat range was." Um, Getting told that I can charge 37 from this Rhino is it's a thing, and you just kind of got to be like, "Oh yeah, okay." Or I think it's like Scout move plus turn one charge, like from like
Yeah.
the Invocatus 8 bound squad is like 37 inches, and nobody's respecting that. How do
Yeah,
you
who needs
respect a
shooting when
37
you
inch
have
threat
such
range?
ranges?
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Look, shooting is just got shooting. Melee is just shooting with range,
Exactly.
without range, right? That's how that works. And it's
So
nice to see an army that has like strength profiles that feel like a ninth edition army. Like the entire 8 bound squad is like strength 12 to 14, and you're just like wounding an armor on threes in melee with infantry just kind of feels wrong to me still now
yep.
after playing this edition for a bit. And World Eaters just are like, nah, we good. We're threes is fine.
So do you think that this army still, in a way, relies on the surprise factor, or the fact that people are not that familiar with it, and the fact that the pre-data slate didn't do that army good actually helps because now they come back twice as strong because people actually don't know what the army does.
I think it is a competitive advantage, but it is not something that you would rely on, and I think the army
Hmm.
would be good otherwise. I think the army is. I will say, like, this is not me saying the world is the sickest army of the game. I think this guy allows a build to exist that would not exist if it didn't exist. That's why he's one of the best transform in the game. I think World Eaters are a mid-tier army that have some pretty cool rules and will punch up because people will not expect them and people will not have the respect for them. That will definitely help, but the army is just solid.
Hmm.
Um, I would be surprised if we didn't see like at least one World Eaters hit like at least like the Shadow round 5-0. Because the army just does exactly what it says on the tin, and yeah, people can you can respect it, you can understand it, but unless you've really had a chance to play against it, so yeah, the surprise factor is definitely helping. But I don't think it's a bad army by any means, and I don't think if you know what it does, um, knowing what it does just means that you get to fear it the right ways. And with an army like this, if you start respecting its threat range too much and not give it, it's one of those ones where you have to give it just enough of an arm and hope it doesn't take the entire body with it. And like you
Hmm.
gotta you gotta feed something to the bear, guys. Like the bear is coming to eat something. It's either
You're
gonna be
going
your
to
point.
lose
It's
something.
gonna be your points or your limbs. You make a decision.
Hmm.
And so you've got to just like feed it exactly enough stuff that it gets like it can't do what it wants because you're getting the right responses, and that's difficult, which if people don't have the heuristics of playing against world eaters enough to really make use of that, yeah, I think it'll be difficult, but it'll be fine. People will be all right. They're going to
Yeah,
lose so hard to Anthony.
I think that's a great description of how to approach this army. You need to feed them those small edible chunks, but you need to be prepared that they will bite off the entire arm. Right, let's move on to number five. What have you brought
Yeah,
next?
so number five, I have the Librarian Dreadnought, which I genuinely think is one of the most interesting data sheets they've printed. I
Hmm.
was fairly high on it, like before the balance data slate changes. It just it was difficult to justify running Blood Angels with all of their unique units being pointed like somebody evil wrote them. I think is probably the 43 point Sanguinary Guard. Sure, they deserve 12 points more than a Wraith Guard, right? Um, so the Librarian Dreadnought's gimmick is that it has like a shooting profile and a damage profile that don't matter. It's toughness like 9 with a 2-up save for some random reason, so like it just doesn't die to garbage.
Hmm.
Shooting you with an Execrene was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. As I'm like, oh, so I wound on 5s and you save on 4s. I don't like this. Uh, So it's just like randomly tanky to other things, and then also it has this really cool ability where on a 2+, it just teleports an infantry unit at the end of the movement phase, which I don't know if anybody's noticed, but teleporting is quite strong. It's really good for getting secondaries. It's really good for applying, units where you need them to be when you're running a bunch of stuff like Death Company. Being able to drop a Death Company squad down and have a 9-inch charge anywhere on the board, off of the board, so you can threaten an advance and charge into a teleport, into drop them somewhere. One really fun thing you can do with them is like you have your Death Company, you roll their advance when they're in Assault Doctrine, you roll like a 1 or 2, and they don't get to go anywhere. So you just leave them next to the Dreadnought and pick them up and teleport them and get a 9-inch charge somewhere else anyway. Which is really cool. Like there's just like some really nice approaches to that. It's great for things like scouts. You can get like a sniper scout squad from one side of the board to the other. You can get infiltrators into a more aggressive position. Like playing against GSC, for example. You start with your home objective, protect them, protect them, protect them. Then by the time your opponent's sort of like drip feeding resources in the middle, you teleport them to where their blips are and start restricting them there. It's really cool and really dynamic ways to approach the game. And then there's aggressors, which kind of say, what if you just focused on these? If you've been living under a rock, you might not have noticed the aggressors plus apothecary biologist combo that's been tearing up the world since Lechu debuted it at the WTC.
WTC.
I say debut. I'm sure people were playing it before, but popularized is probably the better term.
Hmm.
Which is an apothecary biologist with bolter discipline, giving his squad lethal hits and sustained hits. And during Devastator Doctrine, which is the turn that you get advanced in charge, they also get crits on 5s. Aggressors then use the Storm of Fire stratagem for +1 EP and ignore cover. They natively get +1 EP when they're shooting the closest target, and then they fire 18 plus 66 plus blast shots with a billion rerolls for most of the moment, and on average they kill Magnus.
I
And
miss a unit like that in Death Guard.
it's called 3 biologist putrefiers with a Playmarine squad and a Rhino that all pop out and chuck grenade 4 times, with Typhus to do another one to do like 15 more wounds to any unit in the game. It's quite fun
sounds
too.
like
Uh,
sounds like half of your army to do the job that aggressors do on their own. So
to
yeah.
be fair, it's probably not that far off the same points.
Mm,
The aggressor combo is 450.
oh yeah, okay. Then yeah, then it probably is.
Yeah,
You're right.
because the Livy Dread costs points as well, right? So,
Of course.
uh, anyway, back to the Librarian Dreadnought.
Hmm.
So, what if you could pick that unit up and teleport it somewhere? Wouldn't that be really cool? Wouldn't that be way easier to deliver than a Land Raider that can't move on the goddamn boards? Yeah, all yours for an only 16% chance of failure every turn. So yeah, the Livy Dread does unfortunately have to roll a 2+ to use that ability. Otherwise, he just smites himself. Now, I don't know about you, but personally, I've never failed. I will never fail that ability. I just wouldn't. I would just choose not to. However, if you're playing constrained by the rules of reality, it's a fail point for the list. But what it does is do some really cool things, like have the timing of end of movement phase, which is conveniently the same time as Phantasm, which means that as the active player, you choose what order it happens. So you can either be like, I'm going to teleport and block the place you were going to Phantasm into if that was somewhere that you were going to, or I'm going to teleport into the place after you Phantasm because I prefer to do it that way. And then they move behind a wall and then you teleport where you can see them anyway. It's really fun.
Mm.
Um, 1 in 6 of not getting to do it though. It's really
So
scary.
yeah, so that absolutely eliminates the unit for me from the list because with my rolls, 6 times have I used Typhus in I think 3 games. 5 out of 6, I rolled a 1 on his ability.
Well, that just
So
means that you're saving it for the Invitational where you're going to roll nothing but 6s. You got to think about it.
let's stick to
The
that. Let's
gamblers,
stick to that.
Tommy, the gambler's fallacy is only a fallacy if you stop believing in it. All right.
True that. True
Remember,
that. Yeah.
it's the gambler's paradigm if you're believing in yourself.
So
So the
brace
Librarian
yourselves
Dreadnought,
for the
yeah,
invitational.
the library. I do not think the Blood Angels list exists without this guy. That's why I have him
Mm.
so high up. I don't think Blood Angels are the best Space Marines. I think Dark Angels still are, but does have a really cool option. Like you can still do things like advance the aggressors to see if they can get into range, and if they can't, you roll like the 1, 2, 3 on the advance that you needed, then you teleport them, and like that it gives you like another fail case of hit the advance because their advance is shooting anyway from Dev Doctrine, so teleport them doesn't make a difference. Um, or you don't do that and you can try to hit a charge afterwards and things like that. And aggressors are not good in combat, but they do have combat attacks. It's nice to get them places. I don't know why they hit on 4s. It's very sad into Death Guard where they hit on 6s. But yeah, the Libby Dread is phenomenal fun. Just opens up really cool options. It's a nice backup projector roller. It gives you tons of scoring options, and it allows this utterly incredible shooting unit to actually do its job, and that's great. I also want to just very quickly sidebar. What is the ordering that you have on this? It's like a snake like for the it's like 765. Like, why is the 3 not where the 2 is so that it's like in the right orders? I don't get it, Tomic. I don't like this.
What do you mean? Like in
Well, like look at the ordering, right? It goes 6 7 5 4 3 2.
no, it goes from like the bottom. It's 7 6 5. Okay, I messed it up.
Yeah, the 3 and the 2 are the wrong way around, right? That's or the 4
Give
and the 5 are the wrong way around, and the 3 and
give
the
me
2
a
are the
sec.
wrong way around.
I'm correcting this.
I've
You
just
go
noticed
on.
that, and I'm
You
confused now.
continue. You continue, and I'm just
Okay.
gonna make this right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that. Just
Oh,
noticed it now,
CD
and I'm
kicking
like
in.
confused.
I understand. All right.
Okay. Yeah. So that's Librarian Journal. I think Blood Angels are super fun. One of my teammates, Chris Irvine, is playing them for the event. He beat me yesterday with them, which was very disappointing. Um, Turns out when you like hit every charge as Blood Angels, you win the game. Like you would have guessed. It's a really good army for that, and stuff like Death Company are fantastic right now. So yeah, I think Blood Angels are poised to do fairly well at the event. I look forward to seeing what other people have come up with, but they look super fun. They're a genuinely really cool army right now.
Mm. Yeah, I'm actually paired up in Copenhagen to play against the Blood Angels right now. So, and I can't remember if the Libby Dreadnought is there. I think he is. So it's good that we've just done this episode, so I'll know what to expect. Fantastic.
Expect the Libby
Already
Dread to never fail
benefiting.
to teleport. Now, I will say one thing. I do wish it had like how a bunch of the psychic powers have like on a 2+ do a thing, on a 6 do an extra cool thing. The Libby Dread
Hmm.
doesn't have that. He's just on a 2+, and then on one you fight yourself. I feel like on a 6 you should get to coming like 6 away instead of 9 away. But I feel like
Yeah,
maybe it's just the scam potential. Could you imagine losing a final to your opponent rolling a 6 on that, and their aggressors just like being in your deployment zone instead because you screen them out 9 but not 6? That'd be great. I think that would be the best story. Gives us a cowards for not printing that. Uh,
I am actually now mind is bent because with those numbers that you pointed out, I'm now I have like separate slides for everything, and I'm now hyper focused on how to make it right so that on the next slides it doesn't happen again. I'm just gonna drop it. I'm just gonna correct it at the
just
end
leave
when
it.
we
It's
get to
fine. It
number
doesn't
one.
matter.
Yeah,
It
let's.
doesn't matter. It just I just wanted to point it out because otherwise I was going to forget.
I'll
I was going to
correct it.
forget to be a little bit upset about
I'll correct it at the very end.
it. Cool.
Let's move on to your number four, no matter where the four is.
Sure. This is the new Tyranid Neuroelector, which is phenomenal. So for anybody who's not played against the Neuroelector, it is a 670 something point 60 to 75 point lone op that
Hmm.
has a 4+ invulnerable save, is 7 wounds with toughness 5, is has a 12-inch ability to pick a unit and it just takes a battle shock test in your command phase, and then also kicks out an incredible aura of anything within 12 of it that is battle shocked is -1 to hit, and you are +1 to wound against it. Um, just a phenomenal little force multiplier. It does everything you're looking to do. It forces battle shocks in turn. It's an army that really likes your opponent to be battle shocked because they don't have a ton of damage output, and restricting your opponent's objective control that way is a much easier way to do it. It has Shadow in the Warp. It has a bunch of stratagems and abilities. So Synaptic Nexus has a stratagem that whenever your opponent feels battle shock within 12 of you, you can make them take mortal wounds on a 3+ for 6 dice. You have Vanguard Invasion that can get +1 to wound against battle shock units in melee. You have the Neuro Tyrant that gets +1 to wound against battle shock units if it's leading a unit like Neurogods, which it does in something like Synaptic, which it does in something like the Swarm list. There's just a ton of ways to really abuse your opponent being battle shocked. And also, as a low damage output army, +1 to wound against battle shock units is really good. And Tyranids can like I think I ran the numbers of getting up. You can get up to like 18 battle shocks in a turn against a unit if you really want to. I don't recommend it. It requires running like horror spexes and stuff. But
Hmm.
the fact that you can do that is quite funny. And you
Yeah.
start hitting the point where it actually becomes a reliable mechanic. And Neurolictors were just kind of like the last bit of cream on top of that to really make that an actual viable playstyle. Because the ability to make a unit take a battle shock doesn't require line of sight, you can kind of sit behind a wall, wholly within 12 of an objective, so that any unit on it, you can make it take a battle shock. So on the LGT boards, with that very open middle, but often a ruin bearer nearby, you put a Neurolictor into there, and your opponent ever tries to take that middle, you can battle shock them. You can put them on the side objectives that are alone up, they sit on the objective, and anything tries to take it off it, you battle shock it before you do your scoring. So if you put opponent as a unit on it, overmatches your OC, and you're like, cool, take a battle shock, and they fail it, cool, that's 5 primary back that you actually have to interact. And there's
Hmm.
just flows really well. They do everything you're looking for. Now, what they don't do is any effing damage, but who cares?
Hmm.
They're like they're cheap loan ups. Like it's unreasonable to expect them to also be good in combat, and they're not bad. Like they'll fight cultists to death, and that's honestly, like if a guardsman squad runs at them, like they might kill the guard squad, and that's really all I'm looking for out of my 60 to 70 point models.
Hmm.
Remember, Terra players, don't gaslight yourself. Just because Death Leaper's big now does not mean he's good in combat.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it might have been Dom Maidlow on the Six Plus 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 podcast who said that he loves taking action monkeys that can deal with the opponent's action monkeys, and I
Yeah.
think this is one of them. Like
Yeah, I
this
mean,
is a
like
good
it's not going to
example.
win a fight against like anything with 2 wounds, because it's 6 attacks at
Mm,
6-2-1. But anything like literal garbage, it'll take it. It'll take it on.
hmm.
And for me, that's all I'm really looking for.
Yeah. So you've mentioned this already, but it does look, especially with the Tyranids book, that GW is really putting an effort into making Battle Shock something that counts, something that may alter the way the game goes. Uh, but have you actually seen? I mean, I know you are a Tyranid player yourself, so have you actually seen that happen? Have you actually experienced
Oh
Battle
yeah.
Shock? Oh, really? Okay.
Oh god, yeah. Battleshock is like nuts now. Like if you really like you say nuts, like Battleshock is an impactful mechanic. I have played 5 or 6 games of the Eternity Codex, and every single one, Battleshock has been a very meaningful impact on the game. Whether that's from the army-wide Shadow in the Warp, from the Army Shadow in the Warp with Neuroelector, everything's taking test of -1. There are a bunch of like leadership 7 armies in the game right now, and
Hmm.
like on average, half of that army Battleshocks. Like that
Oh,
is
yeah.
like Tau
Just
on
statistics.
army-wide leadership 6 and 7 guided Tau units when they are battle shocked cannot spot for other units. So like you battle shock a couple of Tetra squads and suddenly you don't take damage that turn. You can't do signals, you can't do behind me, you can't do cleanse, you can't do engage on all fronts. There are a lot of ways that gets punished. Now there are some armies that care about it less. If you're universally a leadership 5 or 6 army, if you're playing like Primarchs or Chaplains or you're all in transports where you don't take battle shots, like yeah, there are armies that mitigate it, but even there, you still like, your backfile objective holder might just turn off and you have to send something back and you just take less damage that turn. Then you have all the ways that you like actually like capitalize on it during the turn. So Synaptic Nexus, the stratagem for better grenades when your opponent fails a battle shock, you chuck that out almost every turn if you get the opportunity. Your opponent's taking 4 or 5 battle shocks. The odds they don't fail any of them is incredibly low. Yeah, it's not reliable, but it's not reliable. It's not reliable on single units. It's reliable on mass. It's very difficult to kind of describe the mechanic, but what it kind of ends up being is it's kind of like tactical cards where they're not a thing that you plan for, they're a thing you kind of adjust your game plan on the fly
Hmm.
for. Battleshock kind of feels the same way from Tyranids. You're going to make a bunch of units take battle shocks, and then you're going to look at the game state after your command phase of the turn that you did Shadow in the Warp, or after the turn that you did all your Neuroelectors and all your stratagems. You're going to say, based on the new information of what is now battle shock, can I ignore something or can I focus on something I didn't otherwise get to?
Hmm.
If that unit of swooping hawks in your backfield suddenly doesn't score any points for your opponent this turn or next turn, probably don't need to overwatch them. So you can spend your overwatch somewhere else on something that was a little less optimal, a little more of a high roll, but now gives you like opportunities. And that's kind of what you're looking for out of it. Yeah, it's not reliable on the single unit because you can't ever, any unit on average, if they're leadership 6, they take a test on the 7, they're going to pass it 44% of the time. Or they're going to pass it 56% of the time, which means they're failing for it. It means you cannot count on it on any individual unit, but some units are going to fail. And that
Hmm.
just allows you to change your game plan for it. Neuroelectors just feed into that a little more. That aura of -1 to hit, +1 to wound is phenomenal. But the number of times I've played against like a Tower Votan army, and I just be like, hey, everything takes a shadow in the warp. Also, everything that's next to Death Leaper takes a battle shock as well because it's below starting strength. So like 4 of your units are taking 2 battle shock tests, and then like the Neuroelector said another 1 or 2, and then everything in your army is taking like at least 1. And then at the end of that turn, they have like 3 units that are battle shock, and you're like, cool, those ones get shot down, or those ones are in your backfield, or the
Hmm.
Trigon charges those ones. And now they're not scoring primary, and they're not denying you primary. And you have like one dude on an objective that's controlling it against like 4 units because he's the only thing on it with objective control.
Hmm.
Um, there is nothing wrong with Battle Shock now, especially with the mechanic of like you having to spend the CP beforehand. You cannot auto pass at all the Shadow North Battle Shock. You can't auto pass the Neuroelector Battle Shock. You can't auto pass the Stratagem Battle Shock from Vanguard Invasion. Like all of these are just they happen or they don't. There's nothing your opponent can do about it. And then they're going to spend a CP once per game on passing 1 battle shock. Like, fine, whatever.
Hmm. Does any of the armies that actually have returning units uh do that? Like I don't know, Necrons, GSC, or maybe Guard. Does any of them pay CP to do that?
Oh, for if you don't spend that CPU on like there is a very real world, like if your Necron warrior brick gets battle shocked, it dies. So
Yeah, because it cannot return, right?
yeah,
Because
so
yeah.
you get to chip damage at that point. It gets one return off a Ghost Arc if it's got one, and that's it. And I can
Hmm.
kill one Necron warrior brick if it doesn't have an additional 40 models in it.
Yeah.
Um, Especially
So
if I'm
so
plus one to wound it.
so it
So
grows in value even more.
yeah, spend your CP, but you can't
Mm.
if I battle shock you off of a
That's
Turtle.
what I was going for. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that's amazing.
yeah, no, I love the Neuroelector. It's by far the most interesting new unit that came out of Tyranids. It opened up a ton of playstyles. I know there's been a bunch of hype about Tyranids in terms of like the new detachments like Vanguard Onslaught and Synaptic Nexus. Invasion Fleet loves the plus one to wound because the amount of damage, like the army whites exploding sixes against infantry units for sustained hits one, is turbocharged by plus one to wound because that's one of the biggest. That's with the armies. It doesn't really have a ton of like spike damage. Being able to
Hmm.
just have all of that be an additional plus one to wound, suddenly you're actually winning vehicles on forge. Armorers are leadership seven, right? Like you make two armorers take a test. One of them is on average failing. If you make them all take a test at -1, on average, an armor fails.
Hmm.
Um, so like Chaos Knight suddenly becomes a matchup that you have options in. Be careful into demons; they heal off of battle shocks if you're not careful. But other than that, go nuts.
Yeah. And maybe last question, and we will move on to the next one.
Sure.
But it might be a loaded question. How would you assess Tyranids right now? Because right after the WTC, I played a test game versus Pumba. That was before the Codex, and I had a fairly solid build. He said even that it was a nice build, but it's very high skill cap, so you need to have a lot of reps into it to actually know how it plays and so on. I didn't have the time to play that, so I didn't take any of that to the invitational. But would you agree that Tyranids right now is a fairly high skill cap army to get into because of all those
Um,
tricks and stuff that you need to do, the setup that you need to create for your army actually to do damage because
I think
yeah,
you can get by
yeah.
pretty well with turrets without having like a really good like as long as you have like a basic game plan of how do you approach playing fixed secondaries and get the most out of them. How do you position like the key models like the hive tower and things like that? Like how do you get the most out of them? Like there's definitely a you must be this tall to ride. Like you've got to get a certain amount of like weight into the army, and then
Hmm.
there's a lot. But then like once you hit that level, like you can get a lot more out of them, but you don't really have to. You can definitely just like rely on very reasonably priced monster data sheets and good scoring options and just get your points. And that's great in like a team environment where you're just trying to like you'll get like your 7 to 10 points in almost every game. When you try to apply that to like a singles environment, yeah, you're probably gonna have a rougher time. I think it's a really cool army. I think the new attachments have cleaned that up a little bit. There's a few more simple options. Like Invasion Fleet has this very real, like I said, this really very real damage problem. Where Synaptic Nexus cleans that up a little bit. It gives you the real ones to hit and wound stratagem. You can run zone throws a little more efficiently. Vanguard also gives you the binary. If I go first, I will win. If I go second, we'll see what happens.
Hmm.
Ability. So there's a little bit less impetus on exactly playing the control style, or the horde style, especially. But no, I don't think they're. I think they're kind of landing somewhere around like that 5 to 8 army spot where like you're never going to be happy to pair into them, but you're like, oh, I'm glad this isn't Eldar. I'm glad this isn't CSM kind of thing for me. Where
Hmm.
like I feel like as long as I play well, I'm not going to just like randomly lose to Tyranids because they did something. I will be playing a game the entire way through, and that's fine. That's kind of where you want armies to be.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
Tyranids are really cool. That's partly why I'm not taking them to LGT. Partly is that, and partly is just I did not really feel like painting all of the Tyranid army because it's a ton
Same
of
here.
organics and oh my god. So I've got like an RTT a couple weeks after LGT that I should have some painting time for, and I'm hoping to
Hmm.
take them to that, and we'll see where I land for them for like world championships and things like that. But yeah, it's an interesting place to be.
Okay, very good. And I share the sentiment about painting all those models. I have yeah, my pile of shame is so big when it comes to trend. It's
I
it's
try not to
painfully
think
simple.
about it.
Yeah.
Plus,
All
when
right.
the Nord is gorgeous, and I do not want to rush job and ruin it. So
I'm gonna have someone paint it for me. I don't believe I have the skills, even though I like to paint my armies dirty. That's why Death Guard. That's why Tyranids. I just wouldn't like a centerpiece model like that to be painted by me. That would be a huge waste. Um. Anyway, number three on your list. What would that be?
okay, this is one that's probably not surprising anyone. It might surprise people on where it is, which is Abaddon. Abaddon is a ton of things to a ton of different armies. He's Dark Pact rerolls in Aurora, he has hit rerolls in Aurora, and he's 4+ invulnerable saves in Aurora. And all of those kind of do their own very reasonable thing. The simplest one that people have probably seen before is the hit rerolls aura, which you either run it with Terminators, you run it with guns, you run it with Obliterators and Forge Fiends, and you just have a turbocharged shooting castle. For 310 points, think I'm starting to struggle with him on that one. But if you want to play that style, Abaddon is the way you make it sing. He makes Nurgle Demon Engines incredibly powerful. Like 4 rerolls on them is amazing when you have sustained hits on 5s. Just does a ton of stuff. He's a good ingress threat. He works very well with Terminators as a damage output source. Does a lot of stuff. The other version is the 4+ Invulnerable Save bubble, which is mostly run with cultists, and that's the list we were talking about a little bit earlier when we were talking about the invitational list for Matt that Manny's running, which is like a ton of accursed cultists and regular cultists with a 4 Invulnerable Save, which just says this is hard to kill. And it turns out things that are hard to kill are good at scoring. I don't know if anybody's noticed that before, but when a unit's on an objective and you can't kill it, it usually stays on that objective.
With a
And
crazy OC number.
yeah, exactly. And Abaddon is pretty solid for just doing that. The reason he's kind of down in like 3 is that I don't think Abaddon Abaddon definitely makes builds exist that wouldn't otherwise, but I don't think he's like the best unit. Like I don't there are definitely CSM builds that can play him and don't need him. Where I like the rest of these, I kind of think if you're playing this army, you probably need this. Whereas Abaddon, for the builds he makes exist, he's great, but there are CSM builds that exist without him, which I think kind of changes him in the way that I think about force multipliers. So he's kind of here but hedged. I think in the best builds that he plays in, he's the best unit in the army. But you don't have to have him, which so I have him a little bit lower down. But
Hmm.
Abaddon is phenomenal. He does a ton of stuff. He is an absolute monopolist of that Nargo stratagem because if he gets shot, your game plan falls apart completely, and that's fine. Like it's okay. You're allowed to have a unit that if it dies, it's going to suck as long as you're willing to spend the effort to keep it alive. But it does eat your Nargo stratagem. The can't shoot me. Now you can't use it on other things, and that has a real cost.
Hmm. Yeah, to be perfectly honest, when we first discussed the topic that we were going to talk about, I was sure Abaddon would end up in position number one. My experience playing CSM so far, I played like 3 or 4 games into them. Abaddon was in every single list. He is a nightmare. He is an absolute. I mean, when it comes to force multiplication and like the amount of shots that CSM are able to pull thanks to him, it's hideous. It's disgusting. It's like when I see all the units that CSM can bring and all the shots and hits that they bring to the table thanks to him, it's to me it's he is an actual number one. But I'm sure you have your justification for your number two and number one. So maybe without further ado, let's just see what those are.
Sure. So number 2, I have
Hmm.
the Tetra, which is the Tau unit that has 2 really cool rules. One is it has the marker like keyword, which means that when it guides a unit or when it spots for a unit, giving them the +1/+1 skill, it also provides ignore cover. And then also it gives them chapter master rerolls, which I don't know if you know is a really good rule. Given that we were just talking about Abaddon, it turns out that Tau units that normally hit on 4s, when they hit on 3s, are rolling with exploding 6s and double exploding 6s when they're being guided. Um, they kill everything. There is just the Tau army doesn't exist without Tetras. You cannot play Tau without Tetras. They score, they infiltrate, they are weirdly resilient. They are
Hmm.
toughness 7 with 7 wounds and a 4-up save for
Why?
40 points a model. Like I think they might have one of the best point per wound like in the
Hmm.
game. They don't do anything. Like they don't have any guns or anything, but they don't need to. They can just sit and score and say, "Hey, you get ignore cover for rerolls." And when you're shooting like 66 cyclic ion blaster shots, it kills everything.
Hmm.
They allow just so much of the Tau army to actually function. They infiltrate to stop people getting on top of you as quickly. They are movement 14 or something stupid like that, so they score well. They're just not. They're very little they don't do for the point value. And I think if you're not running at least 2 squads in the Tau army, you're probably trolling. And I would honestly probably run 3. They just are good scoring units. Their gun isn't nothing. It's just like another a couple of, like the pulse blasters. Um, they can tank shock. I don't recommend it. They're like strength 3. But
But still.
it's still an option. You got to get a mortal
Hmm.
wound on something. There's worse ways to do it. Um, yeah, I think Tau are an incredibly strong army coming into LGT. I would not be surprised to see multiple in the top cut. And I think Tetras are the reason they can do that. Everything else is great in Tau. Ghost skills are phenomenal scoring units. Crisis suits are fast, they hit really hard. And without Tetras, it does not matter because they do no damage, because they do not
Hmm.
hit. Um,
So
yeah,
I'm not going to be
Tetras are
very
phenomenal.
original. I'm not going to be very original with the question, but I'll repeat the question that I asked when we were talking about the reanimator. If you face out on the table and you see Tetras, is it a unit that you should prioritize to get rid of in order to, somehow uh, cripple the output of the entire army? Or again, do we focus on the hammers and get rid of them because models that are dead do not score, do not
So
kill
this is a
units, etc.?
really weird question, because there's kind of two answers. If you can kill them, it's great to kill the Tetras. But if you just probably kill them, it's almost not worth it. Because if you leave one Tetra on one wound, you have done nothing to that squad. Which means you've got to do
Hmm.
14. The first 13 damage you do to the squad do not matter, other than in the context that it will make it easier to kill it later. And if you leave one on one wound, that unit does not need to take a battleship test because it is still one of two models and not below starting strength, so it'll still be able to guide. And it
And it still
sits on an
does its job. Yeah.
objective and it has an OC and it still guides and it still has a marker light. And it still goes to a corner and does signals and blah blah blah. So if you can kill it, great. If you can't, just kill one crisis suit instead.
Hmm.
Just put some damage on a ghost kill, hurt a broadside, because that will do more for you. Tau are a very weird army in that all of their units that do damage are, besides broadsides, universally pretty fast and pretty good at scoring and pretty decent OC. Which means that if you kill the Tetras, it maybe makes them play more aggressive with the crisis suits, but it doesn't stop them scoring in the same way that killing like all the things around the Necron Warrior book that can't get to an objective otherwise does. Because that Tau squad can go 18 and then shoot and then move another 12. It's hard to just like stop a Tau army scoring if a Tau army wants to score. So it's difficult to say like, yeah, just kill the scoring elements because their scoring elements are their killing units. Um, so if you know you can kill the Tetras are easier to kill. But you better make damn sure you kill them, otherwise you've done nothing. That's
Hmm.
kind of my process on it.
Hmm.
Which usually to me means just go for the crisis suits because a crisis suit squad that's guided by like a ghost skill, it still hurts. Like, it's gonna hit on threes, no rerolls, it's still double exploding sixes though. Like, you still don't want that. And would you rather kill one crisis suit and get shot by like five with rerolls? Probably not. But
Hmm.
if you're not going to kill the Tetras anyway, you're getting shot by six with rerolls, so you might as well make it more consistent. Um, so no, I don't have a good answer for you. It's always going to be contextual
Hmm.
on what you're damaging them with and how you're approaching killing them and how reliable it is that you can kill them. If they're
Yeah.
just like a lot of the time they're just like sat on a cover base, which gives it's one of those weird things. So if you got a 4-up save, you're a lot better at using cover than a 3-up save unit is because you actually get it against AP0. And Tetras are good resilience against that sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah. There is no good answer. Uh,
yeah.
All right. Then, yeah. If you want to know more about how to tackle Tau or how to play Tau, we did an episode with Kyle Grundy, who is like a Tau connoisseur, and he plays Tau exclusively. So we did an episode with him on his top 7 strongest Tau data sheets or something like that, and how to tackle them. A very almost like a master class sort of episode where you can learn a lot about Tau and both how to pilot it and play against it. He also talks about Tetras and their role and how to go about them when you play against. So do check out that episode and all the other episodes from the series because all of them provide a lot of insight. So they're out there in the Contact Lost YouTube channel or on Spotify. Um, right, I think the time has come for your number one.
I'll do my honorable mention first,
All
because
right,
I
that's good.
so my honorable mention, which is one that I don't think is technically a force multiplier, but it definitely feels like a force multiplier, is the effing Yinkarn. It's a force multiplier in the sense that it multiplies the literal force that I want to apply to my head to a desk, uh, because I just want to smack. No, the Yinkarn. The way I try to think about the Incarn is it's an additional effect that comes attached to Night Spinner damage output. It's like once you killed something, it explodes into a Yinkarn, and that you increase the damage output of the Night Spinner that way. Um, the
Interesting
night
way to put it, but yeah, very much so. Yeah,
it's like
undeniably.
the Night Spinner is like it's like a Pokemon trainer. It throws out a Pokeball with the Yinkarn, and it says, "Hey, go smash somebody," and then it does, and then you're sad. Um, yeah, the Incarn makes everything else in the Elder Army become impossible to deal with, which is for my definition of force multiplier. You can't kill a Swooping Hawk squad because now the Incarn is there. You can't, lose a squad because now the Incarn is there. You can't have your units next to each other because now the Incarn is there. Um, and that gives the Eldar list a ton of space to work with. It causes you problems. It makes you think about different things. You have to consider every opportunity, and they only have to pick the best one or the one that you didn't account for the worst. It makes Phantasm and Fire and Fade and Indirect and Overwatch and every single one of these things just the worst to deal with.
Mhm.
And to me, that's a force multiplier because all it says is every single thing you do, you have to double think because of the incarn, and there is nothing you can do to like make it not good.
It surely
Um,
is a hatred multiplier.
oh, it's definitely that. I definitely hate the incarn the most.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think it's underpriced, or would it be okay if it, for
The
example,
incarn
wasn't
would be good at
charged?
700 points. So yeah,
Hmm. All right. How about if they did change the charging bit to the way it was before? So like
if
you
they just
can.
made it not a unit, that would probably be best.
That's fair as well. But yeah. So do you have any other honorable mentions?
Um,
So,
I
but
mean,
I want.
I don't really think about bad armies. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Guilliman and the
that's true.
Lion are like are excellent. Guilliman is not good, neither is the Lion, but they both do stuff for buffing your army. I think things like Creed have definitely fallen off because there's just not as much regiment stuff in Guard that really benefits from it. Bellicor, I guess, is worth mentioning.
Mhm.
I think Bellicor makes the Demon's army work, but the Demon's army is not good, where therefore he's not worth shouting out. Um,
All right. It hurts my soul that you didn't mention Mortarion because he is. I mean, the first time I heard the term force multiplier in 10th edition was about Mortarion. And
So
what do you think about
he
him?
is a force multiplier. Mortarion is very good, but Mortarion is like the nicest thing I could say about Mortarion is that he's really cheap.
Yes, definitely. Well, his aura is really nice as well. I
He's
mean,
Mortarion's really good. I just don't think he makes Death Guard a I don't think he makes Death Guard strong enough for his inclusion to be worth justifying in like I think Death Guard are fine, and I think Mortarion is a good unit in Death Guard, but I don't think that Mortarion like if you're not next to Mortarion, you're like you feel it a bit, but it's not like problematic. You can
hmm
still make stuff happen when you're not near him. If you're running like triple Piper Scholar, sure, like I get it. But not everybody's playing that. Not especially not everybody's playing entropy cannons, that kind of thing. Murdarian is good. Murdarian is a very, very good Daishi. Every single one of these is better.
hmm
Murdarian is 320 points, man. He is so cheap, um, but he does not.
he doesn't do anything else. Like he doesn't. He's not the beat stick he used
He
to
doesn't
be.
kill an Armiger on average. That's
Yeah.
the depress. He is the 1 in 3 to kill a single Imperial Armiger in combat with a 6 of Field of Pain.
hmm
30%. That's depressing.
Yeah, but you still sort
You
of
still
try to
include him
protect.
100% in every army.
But what I wanted to say is that sometimes he works like uh, I don't know the expression, but like a stopper, I guess, because you want to keep him in the back because you're afraid he's going to die and you don't want to lose your 320 points. But if you do keep him in the back, then it's a wasted 320 points
Yeah,
because he just sits
Mortarian's a
there.
distraction card effect.
Yeah, pretty much.
Um,
Mm,
Mortarion exists like Mortarion is a force multiplier, but you do not take him because he is a force multiplier. You take him because he does reasonable combat, has a good aura, is good at distracting, is very tanky, right? That's like you take him for a bunch of things. He happens to, as part of that, be a force multiplier. It is not
mhm,
his primary role. I think Abaddon is the closest to like that not being his primary role, and the Incarn, obviously, which is
mhm,
why the Incarn's not actually on this list. Abaddon is kind of the closest to that, but I think Abaddon does his job more of that side of things than Mortarion does.
yeah.
You're generally pretty happy in a game where like Abaddon never got into combat. Sometimes the same thing happens. Where like the happiest thing you can say is he took a whole turn to die, so all my other stuff got into combat, and like that's fine too. But it's less his role.
Mhm,
Mortarion definitely wants to be in combat more because he just is less of his power budget is invested into making your other stuff better. He is generally, in technicality, a tanky beat stick.
mhm.
And that would, if we were doing a top 7 tanky beat sticks, he wouldn't be on that list either. But
But he's there. So
he'd be in
for
the honorable
300,
mentions he'd be in the honorable mentions for that one.
yeah. Um, yeah, he's the best of the bad choices. Uh, anyway, let's move on to your number one then.
Sure. So my number one is the Ottart Wayleaper, because oh my fucking god, I hate this model. What if it just did everything, and there was just everything? What if you got an extra CP for one of the cheapest sources of extra CP in the game on a 14-inch moving load operative with an assault weapon, the grenade keyword, and fight first, uh, that also just like auto advances 6 off of fake dice and has a melta gun.
And he's
Just
infantry, so he can phantasm.
and he's infantry, so he can phantasm. Yeah, and he has fire and fade access. Obviously, Eldar don't have to shoot to fire and fade like Tau do, so don't worry about that.
It should just go be fade, basically.
Yeah. Whoever wrote that rule is gonna get faded like that.
Yeah, but
I
even. Mhm.
the Altar Wayleaper takes everything Eldar need, every single thing, and says, "What if it was all just one model?" And then you're like, "I'm gonna take that model," and then you're like, "Yeah, I know you are. No fucking shit."
And yeah, I mean, even the CP region, which happens just because you have him in your army. It's not that you have to roll something, not even a freaking 2-up. It's
Doesn't even
just
have to be on the goddamn board. He will be because he's a load up, but Tau has to
add
roll a
insult to
4-up,
injury.
and Azrael has to be on the board, and the Wayleaper has to like be waving at you from his castle. Um, you could strip like four of the 8 things that this data sheet does off of it, and it would still be one of the best data sheets in the game.
And worth its points.
Yep. It'd be worth it at twice the it wouldn't be worth it at twice the points. That's an exaggeration. But this guy is undercosted. He does too much. He's the kind of the model you can't point this guy appropriately. He just does too much. Like the second you make this guy appropriately pointed, he is like 170 point unit, and you're not going to pay that for an infantry model, which means that they can't balance it. You just need to take some rules off it. Uh, yeah, you
Which
just shouldn't
maybe.
give this much stuff to an infantry dude, right? That's kind of the be all and end all. This guy just cleans up the other game plan. You want to play fixed or tactical? Doesn't matter. Right? Like you're thinking about the CP. No, just pick whichever one's best for the game, Eldar. Don't worry about like having to have trade offs, like playing a more guaranteed game plan in order to lose, like but you lose the CP. No, you have the CP anyway, so don't worry about it. Don't just play tactical if it's better. Play fixed if it's better. Like just think about the game state. Everybody else like stick with tactical because you need the CP. Eldar, you do whatever you want. You're God's most precious child. Um,
I can feel the hatred for the model so much. But is it for the model or is it for the faction?
can it be both?
Yeah, why not both? Sure. Is there a way you think that the this army can be balanced, or does it need like a fundamental rewrite?
I don't care. I just
Hmm.
don't care. I don't want it to be balanced anymore, but I also respect that that's not really like the right thing to say.
Mm,
I want Eldar to just stop existing. I don't want Eldar to be a thing that I have to play against the tournaments. I don't want their rule set to be something I have to think about. But I also respect that's because well, I came up in 7th edition where they were this but worse. So it's hard to like be objective on this. I have never had a positive opinion on Eldar, and I understand that the army can't just not exist in the game, and that it probably can't just have like a 4% win rate as much as I would love it to. But I don't want to stop thinking about it at tournaments.
mm. So tell me this. For your coaching service that you do, have you ever had a person playing Eldar come to
Oh
you?
yeah, I have like 4 or 5 elder clients all the time, and I work with them exactly the same way I would anybody else because this is my public persona. Tom, like this is the person I am on content, not the person I am in my professional environment. Uh,
Right.
and I need to understand those are separate things. And if you are another player that's looking for help, do hit me up. I'm more than happy to help. I even, for example, would play Eldar into a coaching client if they asked me to because it's my job. My job is to help somebody the best I can, and I'm not going to let my personal perspective. Like, if they ask me what my opinion on Eldar is, I'm not going to be nice about it. But I'm not
Hmm.
going to tell them like I'm not going to help them. Like, it's kind of a terrible business decision.
Yeah. Um, do
But
you think
this is ultimately this is a persona, guys. You need to remember that.
so? What do you think, judging by the event results uh, after the data slate and so on? Uh, do you think it's going to be Eldar that take the top at the
Yeah,
LGT,
I
or
would be shocked if Eldar weren't 1, 2, and 3 again.
mhm.
I
Is
would expect Eldar to be 50% of the top cut.
wow? Okay,
They
that's
won't be,
overwhelming.
but I would expect it to be.
Hmm.
There is no way over an event this long that there aren't some other players who get upset, some other players who mirror match. But like, if you ask me if like I thought Vic, Brian, Dan Whitaker, and like somebody
Nas.
else, like and Nas, yeah, would be like 4 of the top 8. Yeah, 100%. I would 100% bet on that. I
Hmm.
think you'd be stupid not to.
And what would be your personal favorite to take it? Like, what
Oh,
would you what
well,
would
I
make
mean,
you
I've got a
happy?
anyone but Ignite, right? So,
I was
that's
thinking factions, not teams.
oh, I don't care about factions. I just don't want I just don't want anyone from Ignite to win.
Fair enough.
I don't want Ignite or Manny or Nassim. And anyone from Ignite or Team England, especially if you're both Vic. Um, um,
Uh, Personal grudges.
yeah, I would love Sako to get the repeats of CSM. I got to root
Yeah, that
CSM
would
because
be
I'm
sweet.
playing them, right? Sako or Liam getting it. I would obviously love to. Um,
See that
yeah,
happen.
but I think CSM or Nid. I would be really cool if Nids won as well. And I'll really
Hmm.
regret not playing them if Nids win. But I also just could not find a list that I liked well enough. Um, Watching triple Norn Emissary at Cherry Hammer get like lose double Norn Emissary turn one to Eldar was like, yeah. So put that back in the box.
Gut wrenching. Yeah.
Like maybe the toughness 11 model with a 2-up save isn't great into fire prisms.
So it seems. Right. Okay. Ines, I think we are done with the list. So I thank you for it. I thank you for coming prepared because this is something that I've seen throughout this entire series. I'm actually shocked and surprised how prepared people come to this. So thank you for playing
Well, I'm
along
glad
as
I
well.
tricked you into thinking I was prepared.
Well,
That's
you definitely made that impression. Sending the list to me a day in advance already shows that you've put some thought process into it, which uh, I am very grateful for. Is there anything that you would like to plug before we
yeah.
finish the
I'll plug
episode?
the normals. I'm going to be at LGT. If you're there, come and say hi. I would always love to. I'm pretty sure like Anthony's brought over a bunch of stat check dice, so we'll have some of those to hand out as well. With that, then ties into I'm part of stat check, so that's stat-check.com or youtube.com/statcheck. We do a live show every Thursday, every Tuesday. Apologies, at 11 p.m. GMT or various other times across the globe that I do not care to know. And that's where you can catch me and Jeremy and Nathan and Anthony and a bunch of other people, guests and all that, having our opinions on 40k, running through the stats of the week and all that sort of thing. It's a great show. We really do enjoy doing it. That goes up live on all the podcast feeds and on YouTube, usually the day after. You can also check out stat-check.com/coaching if you're interested in hearing more from me on working on anything, whether you want to get better at the game, you want to just dive into a tournament, you want to do some reviews, anything like that. Always happy to help out. It's been awesome. Contact Lost is definitely the my job in 40k one definitely drove a few people towards me, so I have to buy you a drink at LGT for that one. But no, it's been great. It's really appreciated. So yeah, if that's something that interests you, please do check that out. We're coming up to stuff like Atlanta and Coventry and Cali Cup and all that sort of thing. So if you're doing any of those or you're trying to qualify for your national team, now's a great time. So come check it out. It would be wonderful.
Thank you for that. Uh, is LGT going to be the topic for the next episode tomorrow, or
I
are you
think
focusing on something
so.
else? Mm,
Anthony's not on the show because he's in Scotland right now at Brian's. So probably, but I'm not 100% sure. It should
yeah,
be, but
we'll see.
we're having Nathan's having a little bit of a tough time at work at the moment in terms of like bit workload. So we have no idea who's going to be on the show right now. So we will find out what the show is going to be about tomorrow at 11 when everybody else does.
That's understandable. I mean, this week is going to be hectic for everyone, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I leave.
Uh,
I leave on Wednesday for LGT, so I leave on Wednesday night.
yeah, I leave on Thursday, so
Yeah.
I know the pain. Anyway, to all our listeners, this is not the only episode that we are going to be releasing today. In the evening today, we're going to do a live session with John Swallow, and we're going to talk about preparing for the event. So, like in general, preparing for major events and how to do that. So, a topic that we covered with Ines last year. So, you might want to check that one out
Yeah.
while you
Don't
wait.
listen to that advice from last year. I did garbage last year. So
But the advice was actually quite sound, and I like the thing that you mentioned about like bringing a mat to put under your feet. I've seen and heard many people mention that they've learned that from you, and they do it the same. I mean, they do the same
there's
thing now.
tons of people with them at WTC. I was very
Yeah,
jealous because I
exactly,
didn't think I did. I forgot to do it and didn't have
exactly.
one.
I think that was your impact on the hobby that you convince people that it's a good idea.
I've got one thing going for me. Some advice I stole from Brian. Yeah,
But it's very good. And then tomorrow, Joker will be. And Ines, I will need your help on the pronunciation of the name because I never know whether it's French or English. But Joker will be interviewing Clem or
I think it's Clement.
Clement Tourmond or something like that.
Definitely can't pronounce that surname. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was hoping to have a discussion with the gentleman before the show to find out how to pronounce it. But actually, it's going to be Joker who's going to be doing the interview. And if we can squeeze one more, then perhaps on Wednesday we will do an interview with Josh Roberts that we wanted to do last week, but due to like clash of time and so on, we couldn't. So maybe we will manage to squeeze in one more. So 3 to 4 episodes coming out this week before the LGT. So watch this space. Click the subscribe button, the alert button, or the bell button on YouTube and so on, and check Spotify frequently because yeah, there is a lot coming from us. So thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Ines, for joining me. As always, it's been great pleasure.
Like,
And
comment, and subscribe. Get down there.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Also, do consider being a patron. I mentioned this in every episode. The link to the patron page is will be down below in the description as well. And I think it's enough on that one of announcements. Ines, I'll see you at the event, and it's been great fun talking
Yeah,
to
see
you.
you on
Thank you.
Friday. See you around 1.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. All right, you have a good one. Bye, everyone.